For today's story, we're covering a brand new academic paper that just dropped. It's the 2021 National Firearms Survey, perhaps one of the more comprehensive firearms surveys that have been conducted, and raises some very interesting stats about defensive use of firearms by U.S. citizens. In this academic paper, 16,708 individual gun owners were transferred to the main survey. And of those, 15,450 proceeded through all the questions. So the people who have completed this academic paper believe that this is the largest sample of firearms owners ever queried about firearms ownership and firearms use in a scientific survey. This survey was approved by Georgetown University's Institutional Review Board. So, first of all, this is a survey, but it's one done by an academic, under academic supervision, under academic standards. So it's one that might present some reliability. So it's an interesting study for that reason. Okay, so the survey apparently concludes the following things. About a third of U.S. adults in the United States report owning firearms, which would total 81.4 million gun owners in the United States. 57.8% of gun owners are male, 42.2% are female. 25.4% of blacks own firearms, 28.3% of Hispanics own firearms, 19.4% of Asians own firearms, and 34.3% of whites own firearms. So they're relatively close to each other, although there's obviously some difference between races. And there's also differences when it comes to self-defense use between races, as we're going to see. 32.2% of U.S. adults aged 21 and over own a firearm. Those 31.9% of U.S. adults aged 18 and over own firearms. All right, the survey also concludes that there are quite a lot of defensive uses of firearms that occur in the United States. According to this academic paper, 31.1% of gun owners, or 25.3 million U.S. adults, have at some point used a gun in self-defense. In most of those cases, however, 81.9%, the gun is not fired. Gun owners, therefore, according to the study, engage in 1.67 million defensive gun uses per year. And the majority of these defensive gun uses take place outside the home, 74.8%. So this is a very interesting study because it says that defensive gun uses are way, way, way more common than anyone really suspected, or it's been suggested before. 31% of gun owners have engaged in self-defense use with a firearm. 82% of the time, the gun's not fired. But that's 1.67 million defensive uses every single year, 75% of which take place outside the home. That's a lot of defensive gun uses. All right, let's press on. About half of defensive gun uses, according to the survey, involve more than one assailant. 51% involve more than one assailant. Handguns are the firearms most commonly used in these self-defense instances, 65.9%, followed by shotguns at 21% and rifles at 13%. Both men and women report using firearms in self-defense at high rates, with 33.8% of male gun owners indicating they've defensively used a gun, and 27.3% of female gun owners indicating they have used a gun. And on screen right now is a chart that shows the rates by demographic, based on race and sex as well, to show the proportion of gun owners who use guns defensively. So I'll let you read that at your own leisure, but you can see the numbers range from 26% for Asians all the way up to 47% for Native Americans, who are apparently the most frequent to use guns in a self-defense capacity. Given that 31.1% of firearms owners have used firearms in self-defense, this implies that 25.3 million U.S. adults had defended themselves at some point with a firearm. Answers to the frequency question suggest gun owners have been involved in a total of 50 million defensive incidences, of which the gun was fired 18% of the time, the gun was shown without being fired 51% of the time, and someone's merely said that they had a gun 31% of the time. Of places where the defensive use occurred, inside the home, 25% of the time, outside the home but on their property, 54% of the time, inside another person's home or on their property, 5% of the time, in a public location, 9% of the time, at work, 3% of the time, and other, 4% of the time. So the defensive gun uses only occur within the bounds of the home 25% of the time, outside the home about 75% of the time, according to the study. As for how many assailants are typically involved in the self-defense shootings or self-defense uses, there is one assailant 48% of the time, two assailants 30% of the time, three assailants 12% of the time, four assailants 4% of the time, and five or more 3% of the time. Which also goes to show why you might need a magazine that has multiple different capacity, because, well, the odds of facing multiple different assailants, you're going to face more than one assailant more than half the time. So that would show a reason to have a larger capacity magazine. A majority of gun owners, 56%, indicate there are some circumstances for which they carry a gun outside their home. Approximately 26% of gun owners, or 21 million individuals, carry handguns for defensive purpose under some sort of concealed carry regime, and about a third of gun owners have wanted to carry a handgun for self-defense. But they were unable to carry for self-defense because the particular situation, local rules prevented them from doing so. So a third of gun owners have wanted to carry, but the law doesn't allow them to in some situation. 82% of gun owners report owning a handgun, 68% report owning a rifle, and 58% report owning a shotgun. The average gun owner apparently owns 5 firearms. The median gun owner owns 3. 29% of gun owners only own 1 firearm. 30% of gun owners have owned a AR-15 or similarly styled rifle, and up to 44 million such rifles have been owned. 48% of gun owners, 39 million people, have owned magazines that hold over 10 rounds, and 542 million such magazines have been owned at various points. Overall, Americans own in excess of 415 million firearms, consisting of approximately 171 million handguns, 146 million rifles, and 98 million shotguns. As part of the self-defense section of the survey, respondents were invited to answer an open response question that asked, have you ever been in a situation, including any reference in earlier response, in which it would have been useful for defensive purposes to have a firearm with a magazine capacity in excess of 10 rounds? If so, briefly describe. Approximately 550 responses were given, with most sketching out details of an encounter. Examples of these responses include the following verbatim responses. So they asked this open-ended question of the people, have you ever been in a situation in which it would be nice to have more than 10 rounds? 550 people said yes with details. We are now going to read some of their answers verbatim. Quote, I got jumped by multiple people in a carjacking in front of our apartments with my wife and children. Quote, yes, I was robbed on the street one time by a group of about 6 people. One was armed and I wasn't. It took about 6 hours of emergency surgery to gap my bones in face, jaws, and skull back in place from being beaten in the head and kicked all over. Damn near killed me. Quote, yes, a man broke into our apartment high. He was approximately 6'4", 300 pounds, and threw a friend of ours across the living room like a rag doll, beat her repeatedly. Yes, the first incident I mentioned. 3 men attempted to rob me outside my home with the intention of entering my home thereafter. My wife and children were inside the home at the time. That was in California, with a magazine that only held 7 shots. I'm a great shot, prior military and other firearms training, but I hate to only have 7 shots with 3 people. In such a situation, very well-trained people, pump up with adrenaline, can and do miss their target. Yes, absolutely, I'm mobilely challenged and was walking my dog one day. 3 men ambushed me from behind, but luckily my dog chased them away. My dog actually bit one of the men. On the farm, we have mountain lions killing our calves, so a larger animal could require more rounds. When 2 people attacked my company's warehouse. Yes, I was alone with my son and 3 large men were trying to break in. I was unable to reload, thank goodness they realized and left. I was charged by a bear. I was very scared in the moment. I panicked and rattled over multiple shots. Most missed, but some hit home and eventually stopped him. That one's just luck, though. I mean, the bear will eat you alive, but I guess it decided to discretion was the better part of valor. Yes, went into a store and 4 thugs approached me telling me to give them money. I produced my handgun by my side and they left. If this had been a shooting with multiple bad guys, a 15 round magazine is best. When I was a teenager, 4 guys did a home invasion at our home. I could easily see needing a 20 or 30 round clip would be necessary. We didn't have weapons and my mom and dad were hurt pretty bad. Dad was stabbed 4 times and they had a gun too. That's when I decided when I was on my own that I would have protection. About 20 coyotes attacked some of my livestock. It took 2 30-round magazines to repel the animals, and then only after killing 10 of them. Yes, I was surrounded by would-be assailants in a parking lot. I was able to escape unharmed, but if they had rushed me, I would most certainly have been able to lay down a rapid field of fire, alternating in various directions. In that scenario, I probably would have missed the targets and needed multiple rapid follow-up shots to hit or at least dissuade the attackers from pressing forward. Only a firearm with 10 or more rounds would have offered that kind of defensive capability. Had several people trespass on my property doing something illegal, and when I called the police, they said it would be a while before they could come out. So when I asked the people to leave, they threatened to kill me. But after they seen I was open carrying, they left the situation. It went a different way. I don't know if I've been able to protect myself with as many of them as there were. The time where there were 4 people in my home and I was fearful of being hurt and my concern was, do I have enough rounds to protect myself? What if I miss had I had to fire the weapon? Twice, it was people attempting to break into my home. I was alone, age 64, and 4 burly men thought no one was home as I'd been napping. They learned quickly this old lady was not without protection. They saw the gun and quickly left. I called 911 and they were apprehended. They had been robbing homes for 6 weeks in the area. Those homes who had guns, they left and went elsewhere. Another time, a group wanted a big party, came to the wrong road. Half were drunk or stoned. I had small children. There was finally someone sober enough to see I had a gun and meant business. It was the middle of the night and they wanted to party, but they had the wrong road. The same person got them all to leave and they never came back. We have no phone at that time. The third one was a cougar attacking my livestock. It ran off, but it killed 4 goats. We called the game warden. They had a special hunt and killed it as we'd been the 4th place that had been hit by the livestock. We had a cougar on our property in our yard 3 times since once my son was stalking him and hit his dog. The other time it ran off before we could get his gun ready. I was walking a long distance through Philadelphia to get to a restaurant. I was approached by 3 men who demanded to know why I thought I could go through their neighborhood. I told them I didn't want any trouble and tried to continue walking, but one stood in my way and asked if I actually thought I was going to leave without answering them. I began to wonder if I was being robbed or assaulted when they first approached, and at this point, it seemed like they would prevent me from leaving. I lifted my shirt and placed my hand on my pistol. I was legally able to conceal carry and said, yes, I'd be leaving. They backed away from me but continued to yell things after me after I left the area. I never pulled the gun out, but them knowing I had it and may use it was enough to stop and escape unharmed. Having less than 10 rounds against 3 attackers, especially if they were also armed, would have put me in a disadvantage if I was unable to accurately hit my targets initially and they continued to pursue me. Yes, I was in Illinois, which does not honor Indiana concealed carry. I had to leave my firearm at home. This was truly the only time in my life I felt I need to actually use a firearm, but I was almost killed. 4 men, 3 with guns displayed and 1 with a knife in his hand, were walking up to me fast in the parking lot screaming, "Stop, and give me everything you have." The parking lot was nearly empty and dark outside. I was able to unlock my car while running, start the car and speed off. Just as I got in the car, I had just enough time to lock the door before the 4 men pointed their guns at the car and the other was stabbing at the window with a knife. They intended to rob and kill me. A couple of rounds were fired as I sped off. I would have needed minimally 10 rounds if I had discharged given the distancing. I almost died because Illinois law and my street smarts, and luck was the only thing that saved me. Yes, I'm 5'2" disabled female. I was stalked by a homeless drug addict. He was detained 4 to 5 times due to red behavior because he was high on methamphetamine. This person could have easily done great potential harm to me. Meth addicts don't always go down easy. Sometimes it takes numerous rounds to get them down. My brother and I were robbed at gunpoint when one of the men got in his car with me after my brother got in the car. The man had already told my brother that he wanted his money, and there were other people watching across the parking lot in case he had any problems with us. So when my brother got out, the man got in with the gun and stuck it right in my right side. He told me not to look at him and give him all my money. With the other men standing in different positions in the parking lot, my brother could have tried to shoot them, or at least tried to scare them off. And if he had had a larger capacity magazine, he could have been able to fire more rounds at them to keep them away while getting help from someone. I think this has been pretty interesting to read a lot of these stories. A lot of people who have shown the reasons why they might have needed a gun, and one with larger capacity magazine. Who needs more than 10 rounds? Well, these people do. And they explain the reasons why. Because the real world isn't always a nice place. And so these stories have been documented as just some of the 1.7 million defensive gun uses that occur every year according to this academic study. Here, by the way, on screen is a chart that shows the ownership rate of AR-15 style rifles. Again, this is broken down by race and gender. I'll let you read this chart for yourself, but I'll simply note that Asians have the least ownership of AR-15 style rifles at 29.2%. And again, Pacific Islanders have the most at almost 50% of people owning a AR-15 style rifle. Thus, that brings us to the end of this brand new academic study that was recently released by William English, the 2021 National Firearms Survey, in which 13,000 people participated, and they were able to interview more people than have ever been interviewed by any such study before, and shows that that firearms use and defensive gun use is way more common than perhaps many of us thought. And it shows that firearms ownership is perhaps way more common than any of us thought, and show that the need for firearms use is way more common than perhaps some of us wished, and shows the need for a firearm and large capacity magazines. So it goes to show the interest of people, the need of people, and how people use firearms. I thought this was an incredibly interesting study, and I hope you learned something from it, at least for a moment. That brings us to the end of the information in this study.